Okay, if you need me to, I'll get them.
Action. It can see you guys and it can hear me. So this is group 3 for special education. There you go.
Yay. Okay. We're missing one girl, but
Yeah. We got Patricia Romero and Linda Rodriguez and
A lot.
Jennifer Neese.
Like I ate 71.
That's enough. Alright, so we just read the case study about Mrs. Hattie's class, and now we're discussing the observable and unobservable behaviors. And so let's just go through. You mentioned one of them, Patricia.
yes, I was saying that he is to stick his tongue out to the actual teacher.
Yeah, Bobby.
And he showed the finger to the aide, and he also spit in the trash can. And I
Tongue.
think this is Bob or Bobby.
Yep, it was Bobby. Yeah.
It
And
was Bobby, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bob is like another kid.
Bobby, Andy,
Yeah.
Jill, and Wanda. That's who I got.
Oh, I got Bobby, Bill, Bob.
Yeah, I left out Bill, I think. It's right here. Sorry. Okay, but we can start with a couple. It's okay if you don't, as long as we can address. So, okay, so like observable or unobservable. Wanda doesn't socialize with other students.
That's observable.
Okay.
Socialize.
And
Right.
talks of terrible things at home.
We can observe that.
That's not observable. How can she know? She doesn't go home with the kid.
Well, but that's what I actually wrote down a couple different things. Like the talking is observable, but we don't really know what the terrible things are. So that might be a concern that we write down. So think of 10 concerns for each category. I didn't get to 10, but I just wrote down that a concern would be to like counseling.
Yeah.
And then Jill,
Talking to the,
say again, Linda.
talking to the parents, like.
Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, so you had said that Bob stuck out his finger and his spit and that was the one that's usually Bobby. Yeah, and he's usually good. So that was my other. Yes, we observed that, right? I actually wrote down that Bobby. A concern might be that why may he be acting out, and then also like if we want to look further, which we will, we can think about stuff like how would we approach that with, for example, what I'm trying to say is, hey Bobby, how do we talk with our words? You know, like when they're little, use your words. So communication with words.
Right.
This is like third grade, so they have had that type of stuff before. Anything else that you guys wrote down or got from the reading that was observable or unobservable? Or I'll ask a question since I wrote some down. How about the fact that she stated Andy is immature?
How do we know he's in a church?
Yeah, I put that under unobservable, but
Yeah,
I also
think that, well, I mean, I don't.
So what's the concern? If she says that, then what's the concern?
Yeah. So.
But I mean, sometimes kids just do things because they act a certain way because they don't want to do something. Doesn't mean he is immature.
Yeah,
He
so
just doesn't want to do something. He acts a certain way to get away from doing that or something.
okay, so that's escape, and I like that you said that because I was like over analyzing it. The fact that he might just not want to do it is a good connection to behaviorism in general. With he just doesn't want to do it. I wrote down like coping skills or how to deal with his feelings, but it might just be that he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he just really doesn't know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, negative attention. Yeah. Okay, that's a good. So I'm just putting that on the right side of my paper for like what do you call it? So I have like observable, unobservable, and then on the like a bookmark I have concerns about each. And then okay, how about Andy plays tricks on Bill and Bob? John says Andy plays tricks on Bill and Bob by putting gum in a seat.
Have
Is that observable?
you seen him do that?
Nope, obviously not. So that's not observable.
Okay.
And Patricia, why do you think he does that?
Can you repeat it again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Why? So why do you think that if we're gonna look at a concern, since this is behavior, why do you think Andy plays tricks on Bill or Bob if he does? And so Bill or Bob is the one that makes Andy kind of wince, like he thinks he's gonna get hit, and they do hit him, but he also plays tricks on them. You had some good insight.
Because he feels that if they mess with him, he can mess with them back. Or maybe
Like a tit for a tat?
because of their bad behavior, they're getting attention from the teacher a lot of it, and he feels like he wants some attention too. So he just acts out for the teacher to give him some of the attention that the other ones get.
Yeah, and if there is a reinforcement for that, then it's going to be a negative reinforcement. I like that
Right.
feedback. Thank you. Because if I did have that student in my class, I would not always be thinking about the simplicity of it's just negative attention. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I wrote down Wanda doesn't have any friends. She has a low self-esteem. Is that observable? We did say that the socializing is observable, but what about...
Right.
I like to play devil's advocate, and I was like, how do we know she doesn't have any friends? Maybe they're just not in this class.
Yeah, how does she know? What about recess time? Does she play? Does she never play with anybody? I don't think she never.
So if she does have a low self-esteem, if we're concerned, I wrote down coping skills, mental disorder, because honestly that could be a chemical imbalance, but there's so little, honestly, that usually happens like middle of high school. But like I just put counseling because she might not be shy. It might just be that she doesn't know anybody, or she might, but we really don't know. We just know that it's a maladaptive. Like we think in our culture that would not be socially acceptable to be a, what do you call it, like a wallflower, or but isn't she the one that talks about things at home? Or was that Jill? That was Jill.
It was Jill.
Yeah, so that's partially observable and unobservable too.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Jill and her stealing? I have a thought, but I'll let y'all do that for, like, impulsive stealing. What do you think about that? Is there a concern?
Yes. Well, I would want to know the reason behind.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she doesn't know that it's wrong, or maybe she has a different outlook about it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I found it versus I stole it.
So maybe she hasn't been taught. I'm not like talking about research based, but my experience based is like people that are abused. So it would make me concerned that, and now especially if it was food that she was stealing, but if it's just items, it could be like even something that was taught, like okay, like they're making, they can't buy enough. So it could be like the home life, like they can't buy something, so they just steal it. Or it could be some kind of like impulsive behavior, kind of like a fetish or something, and they might need some kind of counseling for it. But we could look at it as no big deal, but it's not good for when they get a job one day and they start stealing stuff.
Yeah.
Going back to the stealing thing, actually today, like you said, maybe they have not been caught. Like I was telling today, one of the girls was like, into me crying. And she goes, so-and-so stole something from me. And I go, how do you know she stole that from you? Well, I gave it to her, so she stole it. I'm like,
Interesting.
those are two different things. If you're giving it to her, she's not stealing it from you.
Oh, that's exactly what was just in the checkpoint 5 that I didn't quite finish, and it was saying, does the student understand give and steal, for example? And then you can correct it once they understand that word. Cool.
Right. So I had to explain. I was like, okay, one thing is giving. You know that you're doing this, and I had to kind of explain to her. She was like, oh. So she didn't come for me, and I said, no, you gave it to her. But, oh, okay. And she was happy. But she like, oh my god.
So she was okay that she gave it?
And then she was fine. I didn't say anything else about it. Okay.
Yeah.
This is Cambridge.
Yeah, I was gonna say my daughter the other day said that she had a boyfriend, and my husband said you can't have a boyfriend, and she said that's not fair. And then the next day she said, what does "that's not fair" mean? She doesn't even know the word she's using.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to behavioral objectives and look. Oh, here my clock here. Okay, cool. Let's see how much we can get done in the next 15 minutes. Write the appropriate behavioral objectives. Okay, so
The part two.
kind of. It's like a slew of things that were on the attachments.
Okay.
Well, actually, there's a couple things we could do. Since we're on the roll with behavioral, I was going to go over that one that said individual activity. Well, we're a group right now, but it says write appropriate behavioral objectives for the following student and topics. So this one actually is kind of what we just did, except that, for example, for a student who is mildly disabled and they have a reading comprehension issue, then it actually tells you what you would do. I underlined it. Let me see something.
Oh, I see it.
Okay, it says reading comprehension, then you would get prediction of events. Like, you would just tell the story, like, especially if it has pictures, you would say, okay, the girl was walking and there's like a puddle, or the boy, and then what do you think is going to happen next? Or you can show them and say what happened next when the girl's all muddy, and they can say she fell in. But since we already kind of, I would say with one of the students, we would say like use your words instead of your aggressive behavior, but then we'd have to define what that aggressive behavior is. So it would be a behavioral objective, but this one didn't really leave any blanks. It kind of had answers in there. So let's go on to, we did the unobservable and observable target behaviors. We identified that. I'm sorry, so the activity. Do you guys see the activity 1 through 10?
Activity.
Because the only other things that you're going to see is like a bunch of rules, like ideas for rules for a classroom.
Yes.
Okay, so how about you, Patricia?
No, I don't.
Alright, well, if you're okay with auditory, I'll just read it to you. Because I'm like auditory, but you might not like auditory. Okay,
I can
so
barely see this.
yeah, so I'm just going to read it to you. So it just says putting it all together in the classroom. Based on the following classroom description, there's 5 rules. We have to write 5 rules. So this is fun. So first I'll read the examples of the rules. Now this is kind of surprising. I don't know if you have any rules in your classroom that you substitute at, but it says that preferred rules are like turn in your assignments on time, bring paper and pencil and book to class. But the another example would be proactive rules is what they're calling them. Do y'all know the difference between proactive and reactive? Okay. Like you don't want to like chase the kid. Like tonight my daughter's like, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? And it's like, if I don't be proactive, I'm going to be reactive to a chaos. So it says keep it simple and only 5. And make them specific. But there was one example in here that was a bad example, and I actually was like, oh, because like it looks simple, it's short, but it's actually a bad example because it just says be responsible and be it, and it doesn't say how.
Right, so
Yeah.
so if instead of be responsible, you can say be on class on time,
Yeah.
or come to class on time, or turning your work when it is due.
Yes. Well, I actually read the story. I want to go off on a tangent for a second, and this would be our last activity. Is we're just going to read over this classroom, and we're going to say how would you make a rule to fix that problem. But it was that book called Against Medical Advice. I think it was recommended for this class, and it was about a gentleman that got Tourette's, where he just couldn't help his tics, and he was shaking, and like he would do like the middle finger and stuff like that. But he was only 5, like my daughter's age when it started, and it didn't stop till about 17 years old. So he, at the very end of that story, which is a true story, it's called Against Medical Advice, he actually had a chance to finish high school, but all the teachers were kind of giving up on him because they were like, he's too far behind, but his mom had pulled out all his homework that he didn't turn in. So I was coming back to the rule of turning your homework, but like with students with behavioral or even other cognitive issues, they might forget to turn in their homework, and if that's all we're assessing, then there's a little bit of a